Me go ahead and start our recording. I just want to say welcome. Welcome to our webinar, everybody. This is our September 2024 Diversifying Political Engagement, the Hispanic Community's Perspective here. We thank you everyone for spending your lunch hour with us. For all of you who are watching the replay on YouTube, thank you for sharing your time with us. We are so excited about this conversation, and we are excited about what we're going to hear going forward. My name is Tiffany Thornhill. I'm the program manager here in the Pasteur Center for Politics and Public Service. I'll be behind the scenes running everything. Hopefully no more technical difficulties, but I'll go ahead and lend it to my supervisor. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, everyone. Buenos dias and happy 16 de septiembre, Independence Day for many of us Latinos and here and everywhere. We are very excited about today's Diversifying Political Engagement discussion. As many of you know, this is part of an ongoing series that we've been doing for a couple of years now, where we examine barriers and obstacles that different communities face with regards to civic and political participation and representation. And of course, today's conversation is focusing on the Hispanic community in Arizona, where we're engaging some really wonderful panelists, dear friends of mine, super smart people, to help us think through for the Latino community in Arizona, what are the specific challenges that we have to contend with regards to our community's voice and representation and participation at all levels of government, community change efforts, and so forth. So it's just an open conversation, nonpartisan conversation, or I should say multi-partisan conversation. And every time we do this, we learn some important things, and I think come away inspired to take action and get involved at a different level, and thinking about how to engage people that aren't and bring them to the table that aren't already at the table. So that's what our event is about today. And I think I'll go ahead and start off with a quote from someone that I've always found incredibly inspiring, Cesar Chavez. So with regards to political participation, he said, "Until the chance for political participation is there, we who are poor will continue to attack the soft part of the American system, its economic structure. We will build power through boycotts, strikes, new unions, whatever techniques we can develop. These attacks on the status quo will come not because we hate, but because we know America can construct a humane society for all of its citizens, and that if it does not, there will be chaos." And further, he went on to say, "In the final analysis, it doesn't really matter what the political system is. We don't need perfect political systems. What we need is perfect participation." So that last part of that quote especially is one I use a lot, because I think it's really relevant when we're talking with people that may feel cynical, discouraged, hopeless, may feel like our current political participations are unjust and corrupt, and that there's no legitimate way to make a difference as voters, as citizens, etc. Back in the 60s, when he was trying to organize those farm workers and facing a lot of discouragement, that he had to speak to that cynicism and say, frankly, yes, acknowledge that the system is not perfect, that it's far from perfect, but the only chance we have to make things better, more just, is by participating, is by raising our voice. So we don't need to wait for perfect political systems. What we need is perfect participation, by which he meant all of us together, standing up, having a voice, acting in solidarity to represent our needs in our community. That's the only chance we have to improve things, to make things work the way they ought to work. So that's just my little inspiring quote to kick us off. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, the honorable, esteemed, and very wonderful friend of mine, Leah Marquez Peterson from the Arizona Corporation Commission. She will be taking us through our conversation today. So let me ask her to introduce herself to you.
Thank you, Alberto. And what an honor it is to have such an esteemed panel. And this is an important conversation. So I really am honored to moderate this panel this morning or this afternoon. I serve on the Arizona Corporation Commission, so I'm in a statewide elected position, and we regulate utilities, electric, water, gas, a lot of different infrastructure discussion that we have at the commission. Your quote, though, reminded me, Alberto, I formerly ran the Tucson Hispanic Chamber. So we represented more than 1,500 small businesses, primarily along the southern Arizona area and the border, and certainly heard from a lot of folks about engagement and kind of a sense, I'd say, of almost feeling powerless in many cases when issues are before them that the city council or board of supervisors or state legislators could change, and they felt they were only one voice. What did it matter? I don't know where to go. And so that was a lot of the advice and advocacy we did at the chamber. I think we're going to hear some really great suggestions from our panelists today. Let's go ahead and move to our panelists. We have three really great people. I've got a number of questions to ask. And as the audience listening and participating today, if you have questions, start hanging on to those also, because we'll get to a point eventually where we'll turn to you in the audience and pull those questions together. So first, let's have Representative Annalise Ortiz. Welcome, and please introduce yourself further.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I am Representative Annalise Ortiz. I serve in the Arizona House of Representatives with the honor and privilege of serving the people of Maryvale and Glendale in Legislative District 24. I was born and raised here in Phoenix, and I came to this work from an interesting path. I started out as a broadcast news journalist after I graduated from Cronkite's Journalism School, and after several years of reporting, realized this calling in my heart to do more for the community. And I decided I wanted to leave news and started working at the ACLU of Arizona on criminal justice reform and immigration reform, and did that for about 3.5 years before running for office and being elected in 2022. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm greatly honored to do the work that I do, not only representing our Latino community, but fighting for policies that really impact everyday people, including housing, homelessness, and criminal justice reform, which are three of my passions and top priorities in the legislature.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And Daniel Reese, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. And it's great to be here with everyone. And Leah, you forgot to mention something that I think is super significant. You were the first Latina statewide elected or official in Arizona, the first statewide leader in Arizona. And just such a huge accomplishment, and great to be here with you today and see you and see everyone here on the screen today. My name is Daniel Reese. I am Chief Vice President and Chief of Staff at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona. I've been doing that for about 2 years, maybe a year and a half. Before that, I spent my entire career in public service. From the time I was 18 to 31, I was in election administration. So getting voters to turn out is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And then when I was 31, I was fortunate enough to join Governor Ducey's administration. I served in various capacities, ultimately leading his office, his agenda and government operations as the Chief of Staff to the governor. So that was an incredible experience, and I was fortunate to be able to represent and provide some visibility to the Latino community in that role. Interestingly enough, I remember when I was appointed, I read an article that said I was only the second Latino Chief of Staff to serve the governor and the first since 1977. So I don't love the fact that there was that huge gap, and I'm hoping that we can have some more representation in those positions in the future. But it's great that we've been able to have that representation in various capacities throughout the state and in our government, so that, you know, not only are our citizens represented, but that our youth have the ability to kind of look up and say, oh, I could do that one day too. I will tell you that my 9-year-old son, he tells me that he wants to work in the governor's office. So I know it works. If they see it, it works. If they have that visibility, it works. And I just want to say it's great to be here also with Representative Ortiz. I grew up in your district in Maryvale, so I'm happy to be here with you, and thankful for all the work that you're doing for the citizens of that community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to see you.
See you.
And then we've got Joe Garcia joining us. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Joe Garcia here, Vice President of Public Policy at Chicanos por la Causa. I'm also Executive Director of our CISA Vota CPOC Action Fund. So we have both a 501c3 and a 501c4. And the 501c4, we're very much involved right now in Latino voter engagement, education, and registration. So I invite you to go to our website, latinoloud.vote. You can register to vote there. You can get information about the upcoming election, some key dates. There's some great podcasts available there as well. Younger Latinos talking about issues and so forth. Tomorrow we'll have on our podcast in the morning a live 9:30 Facebook podcast featuring Secretary of State Adrian Fontes and Tom Collins, who's Executive Director of the Arizona Clean Elections. So it's a really good nonpartisan site. It's just about getting more Latinos not only registered to vote and not only voting, but voting from an informed basis. So they need the foundation. We don't just want to put more people out there casting ballots. We want more people casting intelligent, educated ballots that are going to benefit our community and the community at large. Previous life, I was involved quite a bit in journalism, print journalism, newspapers for a lot of years. I grew up in Flagstaff. Graduated from high school there, wanted to see the world. So me and my best friend took off and we made it as far as Tucson. That was our world for a lot of years. I lived a lot of years in Tucson and then of course here in the Valley. So kind of north, south, middle, pretty familiar with the state of Arizona, a great state with great potential and possibilities. And a lot of that is because of the Latino people that are here in our state. We are not the problem. We are the solution. So that's the way I look forward. So I look forward to talking to everybody about the topic and a perfect day to do it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, for joining us. And we've really got the state covered. I live in Tucson. I didn't know you grew up in Flagstaff, and then we've got Phoenix area covered also. So great job. We're really geographically diverse.
And I'm from Sierra Vista, so we got Cochise
there
County.
You go.
Nice.
And just real quick on Joe is very humble, but the Latino Loud Si Se Vota campaign was responsible for a truly humongous, astonishing increase in Latino voter registration and turnout in the last couple of elections that without a doubt made the difference in many key election outcomes. So they've learned a lot that I think we can learn from about what it takes. And I'm anxious to hear more from their perspective.
Yeah, that's a great point, Alberto. And I think let's jump in there. And Joe, I think we'll come back to you because there's such an underrepresentation of eligible Hispanic citizens in voter registration and turnout. What do you think are the primary factors that kind of contribute to this disparity? And I guess what measures are you taking with your effort to get greater Hispanic voter participation in this upcoming election?
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons why people vote, but there are also a lot of reasons why people do not vote. And I'll talk about in general 3 groups of people who do not vote traditionally in large numbers that are representative of the total demographics. And one of those are people, young people. Young people don't vote in large numbers the way you think they would. Now, there is increases, and there have been increases, and we're happy about that. But traditionally, younger people don't vote to the proportion that, say, older people vote. Latinos are a very young population. Median age in Arizona is 26. The median age for non-Latinos is more than 13 years above that. So we're a young population. Young people traditionally don't vote. Poor people or people of very limited, struggling economically also often do not vote. And unfortunately, Latinos are disproportionately represented in poverty. So too many Latinos still live in poverty, struggling to make ends meet, figuring out where you're going to live. It's a struggle. So you don't always pay attention to politics and to voting and these sorts of things. And maybe you move around a lot. And if you move around a lot, your voter registration doesn't follow you. You have to notify a change of address. And the third group of people that traditionally don't vote in large numbers are those with, well, say, limited education, those who don't graduate from high school, and certainly those who don't go on to get some post-secondary education. Well, we know Latinos have that educational attainment gap. Too many of us don't graduate from high school, and there's various reasons why, including that we have to go to work to support our families, or we don't think about college because our parents didn't go to college, so we don't talk about college. There's an 80% chance if your parents went to college that you're going to go to college. Conversely, there's about an 80% chance that if your parents did not go to college, you're not going to go to college either. So it's not an academic thing. So people get hung up a little bit too much on the culture. They think it's our culture that we're not voting. No, these are 3 groups of people that traditionally don't vote, and just happens Latinos fall into all 3 of these groups. But another thing is that we haven't seen our parents vote enough. Perhaps one or both of our parents perhaps are not, they're not engaged, or perhaps one or more of our parents aren't documented, so they cannot vote. So voting wasn't spoken in the house. You don't see your parents voting. You don't think it's part of what you need to do. But I mentioned the young population, and that's what's important now, is that with every election cycle, through the maturation process, there's a whole group of Latinos who are turning 18 years old and are able to vote. And we're a young population, so it comes in waves with every election. So that's what we're trying to do, is to instill the rite of passage, if you will, and the importance that it is that we participate in our democracy, that Latinos participate at a young age. And we know if we can get them at a young age voting, they're going to continue voting the rest of their life, and their kids are going to see them voting and know it's important that they vote. We have a lot of Latino Loud t-shirts. There's different renditions. My favorite one is the t-shirt that has the Latino Loud logo on it, but underneath it says future voter. And it's just a kid's t-shirt. We give those out, and those we can't keep those in stock because everybody loves them. The kids love them, the parents love them. We've presented at various places, including a middle school in Cartwright School District, where we got to talk about the importance of voting to 8th graders. And they're learning this in class, but we want it to be more than just a lesson in class. We want them to understand that you can apply this. And we're able to work with the school district, and fortunately, they have a school uniform policy, but we cleared it through the school district, and the kids, the 8th grade kids who we met with, they're able to wear their Latino Loud Future Voter t-shirts on the school grounds. So it has some, so it's kind of an elite, it's kind of cool if you got that t-shirt. You can walk around, and it's kind of cool that you're a future voter. This is what we need to do. We need to make voting something that people want to do. And the best way that we do that now is by connecting the issues. It's issues oriented. We're nonpartisan, like I said, but there are certain issues that really resonate with our Latino community that we can understand. Issues such as immigration, and there's other issues. Education. The important thing is that housing. All these issues resonate with the general population, of course, but we don't start at the same place. We don't live in the same zip codes. So when we talk about education, many Latinos live in poor school districts that they don't have the best education because it's what school district you're in. So yes, education is important to everyone. We live in different school districts. We start at a different place. Immigration, an important issue across the board. But for the Latino community, it's a personal issue. We all know somebody who is undocumented and faces deportation and harassment. In fact, we all get harassed sometimes because of anti-immigrant rhetoric. So for us, it's a personal issue because it could be someone in our family, perhaps a dreamer or a mother or father or somebody who could be a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, who could be impacted very harshly with this zero tolerance, deport them all kind of stance. So the issues of immigration is personal to us, whereas for many people, it's just politics. So again, the issues are the same, but we don't start at the same place. So we talk about issues, and mostly we listen. We ask future voters, what issues are important to you, to have them make the connection on their own. Nobody's going to vote because you just tell them to vote. Not going to happen. But if you have a dialogue and a conversation, and they start to understand that the things that really matter to them in life, one way to accomplish that is through the ballot box. And for us to be heard, we need to understand that our voice is our vote. So that's what we're trying to make the connection. The young people like the Latino Loud, the logo, the vibe, because they have something to say. Young people have something to say, and I think we need to listen. And if we listen at the ballot box, I think we're going to be a better place for it.
Yeah, and I think the connection you mentioned is key. I'm a mom of an 18-year-old. So I remember when he became eligible to vote, we made sure he got registered, but it's really making that connection. Why does it matter? Your one vote, one voice, how much does that count? And how does it impact your life now and in the future? And I wonder, Daniel, if we could pull you into this conversation. I know you've had a long history working with elections. What are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, I think those are such great points that Joe made. And one of the things that I think is really important as we engage the Latino population is something that we should do for the entire state, which is to make it very easy to vote. And you talk about this idea that people are sometimes working second jobs. They're not able to make it to the polls on election day because they have so many other things going on with their kids. One of the beautiful things that we've done in Arizona, and we were a leader on this, is early voting and vote by mail, being able to get that ballot at your house, cast it at your house, and send it back free of charge, postage paid. All of those things I think can really encourage people to vote and make it very easy for them to vote. But that only really makes a difference if they're informed that that exists. When you really need to do a good job of educating our entire population, and it's as Latino leaders, as people who are engaged in the community, really making sure that they know all the ways that they can be involved, and that is through early voting. It's making sure they know where to find their polling place if they prefer to vote on election day. Just making sure that they have all the information necessary to not only vote, but make informed decisions. We want informed voters as well. And I think that the really interesting part about engaging children, that's always been the case. Throughout my career, we've seen that the younger people just really don't vote, and we've tried to target that population. And what we learned as election administrators was that they listen to their teachers. They'll watch the news occasionally, or they'll hear about the news, and that is sort of peripherally important. But what really inspires them is if they see it in their family. If their parents take them with them to go to the ballot box, if they sit down with them at the kitchen table while they're filling out their early ballot, and really getting them engaged in that process and informing them about just the importance of voting, that really makes the difference, because it's your family that you look to, it's your family that you listen to, that will guide you to kind of your priorities in life. And that's the same when it comes to voting. So I think it's as parents, as mentors to kids, we really need to make sure that they understand the importance that they play in that process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. And Representative Ortiz, I wonder if we could pull you in and ask what are you hearing in your district, in your area, high Latino population in your district in particular? How do we motivate folks to care about the issues and get registered to vote?
Yeah, one of the biggest things I hear when I'm knocking on doors and talking to voters, especially our monolingual Spanish speakers, is that they feel as though a little intimidated by the process, right? They might not recognize every name on their ballot, and they therefore don't want to make the wrong choice. And this especially comes into effect when you think about this year's ballot, right? We are expecting the Maricopa County ballot to be 2 pages long with more than 13 ballot propositions. So one of the things I'm doing is holding town halls and regular coffee meetings so that the community can come, even bring their ballot, because we have vote by mail that Daniel was talking about, and bring their ballot and just, get their questions answered about all of these things that are on the ballot. And so that's where I think it is so critically important for candidates and campaigns to be on the ground, knocking on doors and talking to voters, because you really do start to see that people are hungry for the information. They're hungry for your help, because they're worried about, going to work, putting food on the table, making sure their kid did the homework assignment that's due the next day. So to be able to have hardworking people like the canvassers with CPLC that are doing that nonpartisan voter engagement, or my field team that I was so proud of this year, knocking on doors and having those authentic conversations and saying, this is the process, this is what you have to do. Your vote ultimately is your voice. You make the best choice for you and your family, but we have to make sure people have that basic information of how to fill out the ballot, how to put it back in the envelope, make sure you sign the envelope, the deadlines, all of those things. And I really pride myself in knocking on thousands of doors to make sure I'm bringing those resources to the community.
Yeah, I think that's so vitally important. And I think certainly the first step is getting folks registered to vote, but the second one is actually getting them to vote. And I don't remember the statistics. I don't know if, Joe, you do off the top of your head, but what percentage of those actually registered to vote that are Hispanic actually show up and mail in or show up at the ballot box? How do we engage people in the entire ballot, especially with multi-pages, complicated ballot propositions, so many different positions that they have to vote on? How do we educate our voters?
Yeah, there are 2 types of There's two types of voter intimidation and there's two types of voter education. The first type of voter intimidation is just when you open up the ballot and you've registered and it looks like this huge tax form. And oh my God, there's 2 pages of it. And how will I ever know everything and fill everything out? So part of it is to get over that intimidation factor. If you haven't voted before, it's a scary thing. Is for people to understand is that, you know what, you don't have to be the master voter. You don't have to know every topic and every candidate and every issue, but it is important that you do know certain people to vote for if you want to, or certain issues. The propositions, the way we have it in Arizona, is at the bottom of the ballot. Those are some of the most important issues there are. So we tell some people, hey, it's okay if you want to start with the propositions at the bottom and then work your way to the top. And if you have to leave stuff in the middle, I mean, the truth is, most of us couldn't tell you a lot about the information about the judges, for instance. Do we have to vote on every judge? No, you don't. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel educated, it's okay to leave things blank. So it's not like a tax form where you better fill something out or you're going to get audited. It's not that at all. So the other course, the voter intimidation factor is, people with, AR-15s who are kind of walking around the polling place, and it's a little scary. So we tell people, vote from home. Get your ballot, mail it from home. You have time to do it on your own time. It's a long ballot. You can do it over a couple days. Take your time, research if you want. So, you don't have to vote. You can avoid the lines. There's nothing that's going to keep you from voting. Say you're at work. It's like, darn it, I couldn't break away. I didn't get to vote. Vote from home. Vote for the ballot. It's very safe. It's a lot more comfortable. So that's the voter intimidation part. But the voter education part also is, again, where people understand what they need to do with the ballot. When do I have to send it in? What are the deadlines? Why do they want my signature on the ballot on the envelope? Why do they want my phone number? They want your signature because they match it against records to make sure it's you. They want your phone number. If there's a problem with your ballot, they can call you directly, the Elections Bureau, and make sure that this was your ballot, or there's some problem. Maybe they can resolve it right then and there. So that's the only reason they want it. They're not going to put you on for jury duty. They're not going to come to your house to see if you have anybody living there that shouldn't be living there, is undocumented, I think. So that's the education part too, of the ballot itself and the process. And of course, the other part of the education is to know about offices. What do offices do? I mean, you know this, Leah, with the Corporation Commission. Most people, they're like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that does.
No, I know.
Right. But when they find out, like, well, you know what? Corporation Commission does a lot of important things that impact your life. Everything from deciding, on many cases, rates of utility companies, and also how utility companies grow, what energy they use, the future of energy growth, which is so important to our state. And then they can it affects me, that utility rate. Yes. Oh, well, then this is important. So it's a matter of educating what offices do what, so they can understand that everything on that ballot impacts your life.
Absolutely.
People don't understand this. So we do that big connection. But regarding your previous question, you're right. It's a two-part process. We can register people to vote, and we should not assume, therefore, they are going to vote. It's about 50-50 chance they register to vote that they're going to show up to vote. It's kind of similar to it's a two-part process. It's like if you're going to get married, let's say you're engaged, right? If you're engaged, you ain't married. You're just engaged. That's what voter registration is. It means you're engaged.
That's a good correlation.
You can get married. You can get this long-term relationship with democracy. You're eligible now. But after you pop the question and after you are engaged, then you truly have to take it to the next step, which is to actually physically vote. Arizona, it does some great things. I think one of the things is, vote by mail is great. Service Arizona, you can register online, like I said, just about anywhere, including LatinoLoud.vote. I mean, all those things are great. But in our state, you have to register to vote 29 days before a general election. So that cutoff date right now, it is October 7th. So if you don't register before October 7, you're not going to be eligible to vote in the November election. So let's say you're about October 10th, you feel like, you know what, I think I'm going to register to vote because I think I'm going to vote in this election. You're not in Arizona. It's the cutoff point, October 7. Nevada has same-day voter registration. We
Wow.
also have the Latino Loud program up there, which is very, very successful. But in Nevada, you can register on that day and vote that day. Arizona, we don't do that. Every state is different. And then just the idea of the paper ballot and mailing in the ballot. Well, for us, older generations, we're kind of like used to that. That's fine. Younger generations, some people have never mailed anything in their entire life. They certainly don't deal with a lot of paper. They live in this. And the truth is, the day that we decide to allow voting by phone, it's a game changer. It's not that we can't do it, because there's plenty of security. We know that. You can buy everything you want over the phone. You can give all kinds of information. You can apply for loans. You can buy a car. We purchase all kinds of things through these things, but you can't vote on that. But the day we do that, it changes it. We found that young people are very much engaged in the political process on the phone, texting, Instagramming,
Facebook comments.
all the stuff, right? But the paper ballot is where it kind of stops for them. So we're just trying to say, you know what? You need to take it one more step further. And I know that world, the digital world's important to you, but we live in a paper ballot world, and you need
Yeah,
to.
no, I agree. And
to-
I know our family just recently received our Clean Elections voter guide at home. And a lot of the voter guides, I think the League of Women Voters and other groups do them that list the ballot propositions or list all the candidates. I think those are important too, to save, hang on to, circle, ask questions, go to the websites and do the homework, do the research. And as I think you mentioned, Joe, you could take a couple weeks to do your ballot if you need. Just hang on to it and keep researching who are the judges and the constables and the city council members and commissioners and legislators and others that they need to vote on. I think that's really important.
And to that point of young people, right, that we were talking about earlier, I found it really interesting in the primary this year. I noticed that, after the first couple weeks ballots had been mailed, we start to weed out the people that have already turned in their ballots, right? Because we're able to see that data. So we're not going to waste time knocking on a door if we know they've already voted. And towards the last 2 weeks, right before the end of the election, overwhelmingly, the people that were in our universe, which is the, sphere of voters we're trying to talk to, were 30 and under. And I found that really interesting because I think Joe made a good point about where young people aren't as used to using the mail. And I think a lot of young people don't know just how easy it is, that you don't have to go to a post office, you don't have to drive anywhere, you just put it back in the mailbox. And so part of the way that I have been approaching voter education and outreach is to really meet young people where they are. I utilize TikTok, and I interact with people of all ages on TikTok, but I do find a lot of young people are very curious about the process and the information once it's available to them on a platform that they use and they enjoy using, right? They use it for entertainment. So why not bring them the information where they are? And I even had a page at the Capitol who typically the pages that assist the representatives are younger folks. And I had a page come up to me and say, my younger sister isn't involved in politics at all. And she started talking to me about a bill going through the legislature. And I was like, how do you know about this bill? And she was like, I saw it on Rep. Ortiz's TikTok. And so I think it's really important that when we talk about getting younger people to vote, that we really are making sure we're utilizing creative tactics that they already are engaged with to get them excited about the process and really speaking their language as a younger generation, which also includes, one last quick point I'll make, is having young people on your staff. If you're doing voter education and voter outreach, having young people, really inform your strategy. They are brilliant. Our younger generation, they, like you said, they have a lot to say. They are so smart. And I would just love to see more organizations really investing in the leadership development of young folks, because I think that is the key to a brighter future.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit. Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah.
Commissioner, the point that I'd want to make is we need to educate our younger folks and Latino population and really the entire Arizona community on our election processes. But more broadly than that, I think it's important for people to know what role they play in the democratic process. Arizona was the first state in the nation to pass the American Civics Act. And that essentially requires you, before you graduate high school, or I learned today, get your GED, you have to take the citizenship test in order to graduate. And that's something that I think is really important because it shows the role that you play in that democratic process. And I would hear so many times when I was registering voters that my vote doesn't count. I don't know why. I don't need to do that. Well, if you look at our 2022 election results, they were so close. Our AG's race was decided by less than 300 votes. So if there's any proof that your vote does matter, that you do play a really strong role in that democratic process, take a look at some of the results that we've seen recently as Arizona has become increasingly competitive. Every vote really does matter. So just kind of educating people on that. And I think what Representative Ortiz and what Joe, you're doing in there to engage the young community is so important, because may the best man win, right? When you're out there, when you're actually engaging people, that's when you're going to see those results. That's when they're going to feel as if they were talked to. People reached out to them. People cared about whether they were going to be engaged in that political process. So if you're a candidate running for office right now, I think what Representative Ortiz is doing is a model to engage our young people, to make sure that they know that they do play a role, and educate them on some of the different policies and how it will impact their lives. A lot of times people want to vote for president, or they want to vote for the Senate, because those are those sort of the races that they hear about on the news. But you and I know, or we all know on this panel, that it's those local elections that really have the most impact day to day on our lives. So it's really just making sure that they're engaged, aware. Read your Clean Elections Guide. Look at the publicity pamphlet that the Secretary of State's office sends out, and follow your elected officials on social media. Get engaged, learn a little bit more about the process so that you're educated and you can make that informed decision come election time.
I'm just going to jump in real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, such important points, and they really resonate with research we've been doing here at ASU that validates everything you've been saying. So we conducted a 3-year study of student voting behavior at the university, and one of the things we came across loud and clear is that our young people, excuse me, are not using official election information sources. They're not aware of them. So yeah, we have wonderful things that are put out every election by the Secretary of State's office and county elections office and the city clerk's offices. Our young folks are not going to those websites. And what does inform their votes is what they're seeing on social media. So they're not watching, typically they're not watching the television news, they're not reading newspapers, but they are aware of political issues to the extent that they're being reposted on social media that they follow by people that they admire, that they respect, that they trust. So we need to figure out, and I love Representative Ortiz's suggestion about having young people on these committees, on these staff, to help us think about how to do that. Years ago, we engaged during COVID when everyone was locked in and we couldn't do traditional voter outreach. We engaged Opportunity Youth through a special project to train them how to do voter engagement. When they couldn't table and they couldn't go to events, they figured out how to use social media to bring the information to people, and it was incredibly successful. So I think everything you're saying absolutely is supported by the research. We need to go to where young people are at, and that's social media, and figure out how to give them credible information and work with them to come up with strategies to make it interesting and to connect the dots, like Joe said, with the things that they already care about.
Yeah, I think sometimes the very first step folks take, whether they're young people or otherwise, is some kind of political engagement, speaking at a city council meeting, speaking at a legislative hearing if they know how to do so, or weighing in even on a Facebook comment. I think that was mentioned earlier. I know, Daniel, you previously worked for Governor Ducey, and there are lots of boards and commissions, whether at the city, the county, the state level. I mean, what do we know, or how do we get more Latinos engaged in this type of public participation? Any ideas?
I think it's dependent on all of us to make those very direct communications. And I think that's being done by some of the people on this panel, but we really need to speak to our family. We need to speak to our friends, and we need to talk to them about the importance, because as I mentioned earlier, you can have these these great campaigns. You can get this, nice educational pamphlet in the mail, but really, it's our peers that inform our behaviors. It's our families that inform our behaviors and can kind of educate us all on the importance of the role that we play. But for those that are watching this panel, you're probably already engaged, and I do think that it's great for that visibility on our Arizona boards and commissions. So definitely recommend that you all visit Governor Hobbs' website, azgovernor.gov, and see if there's a board and commission that you're qualified to serve on, so that you have that ability to play a role in the process.
And I always remind people there are hundreds of boards and commissions. Even at the Corporation Commission, which I serve, we have boards and so on that folks can participate in, called our line siting committees and so on.
And we all bring that different perspective, right? I mean, one of the beautiful things that I loved about being a part of Governor Ducey's administration is my background was much different than a lot of my peers and colleagues on that team. And he would listen to me. I could tell him, well, here's why I don't think that's a good bill. And I'll tell you why this would have impacted me negatively if I was a student. And he would listen. And it would actually impact the decision that he would make. He took some legislative action that was based on some of those informed recommendations. So having that input in the process, being a part of the political process, whether you're at the head and you're running for office, you're an elected official, whether you're on the staff, whether you're on a board and commission, the representation. It's not, visibility is great, but the representation that you can bring based on your background, your life experiences is so cool.
Right. Yeah, and I thank you, Tiffany. I just saw she put in the chat the link, I think, to the Arizona boards and commissions. I know I'm a former small business owner. I owned a chain of gas stations actually in Tucson. My very first political involvement was being appointed to the City of Tucson Small Business Commission. And people thought, what is that? Well, we would sit around and talk about challenges that face us. We would talk to mayor and council. It really opened my eyes to how impactful elected officials are. So, I mean, I think there are hundreds of commissions and boards and ways in which people can get involved wherever you live in the state. Good. And Representative Ortiz, did you want to weigh in on that? I know legislative hearings can be a scary thing for the public to try to be involved in. How do you encourage others to actually give you perspective?
Yeah, well, I love this question because prior to running for office, I worked at the ACLU of Arizona, where I trained people on how to go down to the state capitol and give testimony. So it's something I have a lot of experience with. And the number one thing I tell people is you are smarter than 99% of the legislators on whatever topic you are going to speak about. Like, you are the expert. And I think a lot of people get intimidated, but it's really important to remember that not every legislator has lived experience with maybe your industry that you work in. Or I worked with a lot of people who had served time in our Department of Corrections, and they were able to speak to the issues in a way that as legislators, we may have never had a loved one in prison, but we're making decisions about the Department of Corrections. We need to hear that perspective. So I think the number one thing is to go in with confidence and know that your legislators are there to work for you and to serve you. And it's really important when we're crafting policy that we listen to all perspectives. And for the most part, your legislators down there will respect and value what you have to say, even if they don't exactly agree with your perspective on the policy. So that is an important thing to remember. The one thing I wish was more accessible is that during the time of day is not ideal, right? Our committees often happen during the workday, or, they happen late into the evening sometimes. And people have busy lives. So the other thing to remember is that your legislator is always an email away. You can find all of our emails at azleg.gov. You can find what legislative district you live in, because you might not know your legislator, and that's nothing to be ashamed about. Just go ahead and find them and reach out with an email, because I know for myself, I always read the emails from constituents. It's always important to me to hear perspectives, again, especially from people who might work in a certain industry or have, healthcare expertise that I don't have. So just don't be intimidated to share your thoughts and keep up with the news, because a lot of the time during the legislative session, which begins in January, there's a lot of media coverage on the bills that we're considering. And so although it might seem like it's very inaccessible about what your legislators are doing, follow, some of the political reporters who keep really close tabs on what's going on with these bills. Follow your legislators on social media, and don't be afraid to make your voice heard, because ultimately we really need to hear them as policymakers.
No, and I completely agree with you. So I'll put a plug in for the Arizona Corporation Commission. We regulate some 400 utilities across the state. So if the utility has notified you that we are looking at a rate case or some kind of program in the area, we've tried to make it as easy as possible for folks to either email, they can participate in our hearings through WebEx, they can call in on the phone. If you go to azcc.gov, they see the 5 commissioners. You can click on our photos. It'll shoot us an email. We try to make it just as easy as possible since we're working with folks all across the state. But I think you'll find, for those listening, that elected officials really do want to hear from people, whether they're serving at the city, the county, the state, and so that we can hear your perspective, because we're sitting there representing you, in essence. And thank you, Tiffany, for putting the link. I see that popping up there. So I wanted to ask Joe, if you don't mind if I switch back to Joe. We've just talked about how to reach young people and social media, but there's also a concern with misinformation. I mean, anyone can make a video or put a tweet out there and so on. How do we direct people, the Latino community, to, qualified organizations or media outlets, or how should they be learning when there's so much misinformation out there?
Yeah. And before I get to that question, I wanted to answer a question that was in the chat that I saw, and that was, have we ever considered providing a cheat sheet to our communities so they can fill it out, bring it with them to the polls? That could help them. And by all means, you can take that information to the polls. Generally, about 45 days before the election, there's a sample ballot available. You can usually call it up to Secretary of State's office or Maricopa County Recorder's office or wherever you might live. But the sample ballots are available about 45 days before the election. So any day now, because we're about 49 days, I believe, until the general election now. Check my math. I'm sorry.
I think it's 50. I have a countdown on my phone.
Is it 50 now? 50, 49, whatever, but the point is, it's not 51. So yeah, so that sample ballot should be available, and you can take that to the polls if that helps you. It speeds things up. Maybe you have it, but again, you can vote from home too. That's also possible. The misinformation is something that is very hard to deal with. And the reasons are because people aren't tuned into the traditional media that they used to be. And traditional media, and I worked for traditional print media for more than 35 years. So I can tell you, I could tell you all about that. There's no grand conspiracy in traditional news media. We had people politically on the far right, the far left, in between, independents, Republicans, it really didn't matter. Everybody worked really hard together to do fair and balanced reporting. I can tell you and I can tell you that still goes on with traditional media. The problem is that there's so many different types of media that we do what's called cafeteria menu shopping. We look for sites that we think agree with us, that's going to reinforce our political beliefs, and that's the site we keep going to. And I won't name the sites, you can figure them out, but there is political bias now. And there always has been to a certain extent, but the traditional media that we used to all kind of share in is kind of gone. What's worse is that somebody will read a blog, and for them, whatever's in that blog is going to be like the truth because I read it on the internet. It's like, yeah, but did you read the New York Times story? Well, that's on the internet too, but so is this blog. Well, a blog in the New York Times, or whatever traditional news media you want to put there, is not the same. It's not equivalent. Yes, they're both on the internet, but that doesn't mean they're both equal. The secondary problem is that what's repeated so quickly across social media. So let's see somebody read something on the blog and they send it to their friends, and their friends, oh my God, they're eating cats and dogs in Ohio. goes across social media so fast, and everybody repeats it and repeats it and repeats it, and it's just gone haywire. And then the facts that come up, and as you know, using this case in particular, where even the governor of Ohio is saying, no, that's not the case. There's no evidence that this is happening whatsoever. It doesn't matter. We don't care. We like the the social media aspect, right? So, we fall victim to that, but we are also willing participants. We don't do enough of our own research, if you will. We don't look for a trusted fact. Everything has become almost a reality TV instead of reality itself. And unfortunately for our community, sometimes we fall victim to that, especially if it's spoken in Spanish. It's like, well, they're talking to me because they're talking to me in Spanish. Well, just because they're talking to you in Spanish doesn't mean it's any more truthful than if they were speaking to you in English. So, I think it's really difficult to say, how do you combat that? Because what did someone once say, that a lie can go twice around the world before the truth can even put its pants on, or something like that. Maybe it was the socks. I don't know what the saying was, but it's so true. And we've just seen it again and again and again. So I think you have to go to trusted information. I think Arizona Clean Elections Commission is a great site. I think Secretary of State's office is a great site. Nonpartisan sites, if you can find those are always positive as well. The one thing you want to avoid, though, are just essentially blogs. Don't think that a blog is telling you the truth. And even though it may have a link to some information, all it's doing is linking to other information that supports the blog. Some people love blogs. I have friends that swear by them. Generally, they get caught up in conspiracy theories and everything else, but it's not factual information. So I think the best thing you could do really is, I truly believe this is go to 3, 4, 5 different sources of trusted sources, and then make decisions. And I think even you may look at the right and the left when it comes to news media. That's fine. Look at the right media and the left media. Read them both. Watch both programs, different stations. But you need to get away from kind of going to just a single source as your information, because that single source has a bias. It's very hard to deal with the misinformation, because once something gets in our mind, we kind of think it's true, and we kind of think it's fact. And I'll give you an example is, everybody out there, when you're driving, everybody in there thinks they're the best driver in the world. And I think we've all been cut off, run off the road, nearly hit, or have been in accidents and so forth. I think that theory's out the window. Not everybody out there is the greatest driver in the world, and
Yeah.
we all think we are. And we all think we're the most intelligent person, but we've got to have a certain amount of skepticism. And just because a friend told you that doesn't mean it's true. Just because you read it on the internet, it doesn't mean it's true. Just because you've seen it 2 different places, that still doesn't mean it's true. You've really got to use common sense, and then you've got to look for. I really think that I still think our mainstream media, while it isn't what it used to be, because nobody reads newspapers anymore. Those are very rare, but those newspapers have transitioned to online. And I still think those are the best source of information, because they give fair and balanced reporting. And that's what you want, is you want to read something or go to some place where it's giving you different sides, and you're kind of looking at it, and they're giving you some numbers, and you're seeing some quotes from different people. And it's like, all right, well, I kind of think this, but this makes sense. That's when you're doing a good job as a consumer of news and information. But if you're just going by one side, and one person said that, and you're running with it because that's where everybody else is running with the herd, I hate to say this, but partly that's on you, because nobody can do this except you. You need to be skeptical, and you need to find as many sites that you can that you trust, and you need to be skeptical. And it's okay to say, you know what, that sounds a little far-fetched, them eating dogs and cats, really? And then when the facts are there, it doesn't matter, because that lie is continuing to be out there, right? Because it's a political lie, because there's political benefit. But we know, if you really want to know, and you really want to know the truth, you can find out that indeed the immigrants in Ohio and immigrants everywhere are not eating cats and dogs. We know that. And if you choose to believe that, that's only because you have chosen to believe in misinformation and run with that. And there's nothing we can do to prevent that, but it does fall on an educated voter educating themselves, doing their homework. That has to take place.
And I think it is interesting. You brought up blogs also as you were speaking. And I mean, I read 3 or 4 blogs a day, but I see them for what they are. They're someone's opinion. They're biased, from their perspective. I find it interesting. I like following those folks, so I read them. But it is hard, again, as a mom of an 18-year-old, when he's looking at this very multi-page ballot coming up, and I want him to have his own mind and not tell him how to vote or anything like that. Have him choose whatever party he's comfortable with and so on. But he's got to find his source of information. And I'll tell you, it's very hard as a mother to figure out, where do you send him? He's not going to read a mainline media website. He might look at the Clean Elections pamphlet for a minute, but he's more likely going to look at memes on social media. And that's not a good place to learn, how you should vote. I don't know. Daniel, do you want to weigh in at all on this? Misinformation?
It is a huge problem. And I think there was such a distrust of the media that it did. I think a lot of people left and they went to blogs and they went to these alternative news sources, and not all of them are very reliable. And so I think one of the things that we can all do as citizens who are engaged in the process is to be skeptical and be curious. Be skeptical whether it's a blog, be skeptical whether it's a candidate that's telling you something, be skeptical whether it's something you see in the mainstream media. Be curious, research it. I mean, we all have to make purchases every now and then, and we will Google. I know I will Google like for days before I pull the trigger and check out, on that online shopping item. We should be the same way in terms of voting for, in deciding who we're going to be voting for. Research every political position, research the backgrounds of these people, of what they're saying, whether they have any basis in truth. That's probably a good sign on whether that candidate is someone that you should be supporting. All those things, just being curious. There's a lot of bad information online, but there's also a lot of really good information. So just taking that skeptical and curious approach, I think, is beneficial.
Yeah, I actually feel it's tough when even looking at different candidates, because people can say anything about someone, their background, their history, their experience, and then you have to dispute that. So as even a young person like my son, how does he realize what's true, what's not true about candidates and the ballot propositions and so on? It's a tough time.
And it is great. I do think that we have these great resources, and I would love it if more people read them. But through the Clean Elections Guide, where you're hearing directly from the candidate themselves, through the publicity pamphlet that the Secretary of State's putting out to really learn about the impact of these different propositions on our lives, all those are really good resources. So in that sort of skeptical, curious train of thought, there's a really solid place to fall back on, and those are those really official resources.
Yeah, I agree. Representative Ortiz, would you like to weigh in on misinformation or where you send folks?
Yeah, I would say, I really wish media literacy was taught in schools. I think it's so important for people of all ages, and this is something I try to work with my mother on, to know how to really suss out whether something is a valid news source or not, right? It is a skill that you have to develop, because there's just so much out there, and it's very hard to sort through the noise and figure out what is something that is reliable, nonpartisan, and what is something that is clearly just complete lies in some cases. But one of the things I think that for the attendees to really take away is that never underestimate the power of your own network and your own relationships, and the people who know you and trust you, and how you can work with them to really get them to really combat some of that misinformation you might hear. And it's not always the easiest, right? I think we all have that one family member who will say something really off the rails at dinner, and you're like, where did you read that? Like, that is not true. But you're like, I'm just not going to engage with Uncle whatever. But like, what if you did? What if you did try to lean into that in a very respectful way of, well, let's have a conversation about that. Because I'm hearing this, or I know a school board member personally who's told me that in no school district in Arizona Arizona are they, allowing boys and girls bathrooms, which is one example that I got on the doors from a monolingual Spanish speaker who said, this is happening in the local school districts. And I said, no, it's not. And let's walk through it and let's talk through it. So I would encourage people to really try to use your own expertise to lean into those what can be challenging conversations, because I think you will be really interested to know how far you can actually move the people who are closest to you, because they trust you, right? And that is what's so important, to not take for granted when you do hear some of those really outlandish things from people you love. You love them for a reason, right? Despite their crazy views on things. So why not try to have a conversation in a respectful way? And let's try to bring back civil dialogue and operating in facts, because so often that is what is at the root of this misinformation, is that facts just go completely out the window. And we have to get back to a time when we can just agree on the basic facts of what's in front of our eyes and what science and evidence shows us for whatever issue, right? There's a lot of different issues that are impacted by this.
Right. And you bring up kind of civility, how to engage. And I think back to my own kitchen table growing up with my parents, who are a different party than my brother and I, and how we had conversations growing up and agreeing to disagree. Obviously, it's your parents, so you're respectful, but how that then morphs into where we are at work or our own families or with friends who have different perspectives. It seems like we've gotten pretty far away from civility in conversation. You hear about the stories in the past, Representative, you tell us of people disagreeing on the floor at the House or the Senate and then going out for beers afterwards and everybody gets along. And I didn't sound like that's happening anymore. Any thoughts on how do we get back to something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it does happen still at the Capitol, right? We can still have those civil conversations or even just checking in on each other. How are the kids doing? How was your vacation? That definitely still happens. But I think one of the important things is to recognize that we are all here for the same reason, which is to serve the people of Arizona and to bring about good change for our communities. We want our kids to be safe. We want people to have good paying jobs and be able to put food on the table. And what I really wish is that we could set aside some of the more culture war type bills that get introduced, often as what I consider to be messaging bills, right? They're introduced for the sole purpose of creating a media narrative that the other side likes this or doesn't like that, and to try to villainize those who will vote no on a certain bill. And I just think that if we were solely focused on the issues that matter most to Arizonans, we would make so much positive change. And that's something that I try to implement and model and live out as a value. But it's challenging, right? The Capitol is a highly emotional place. And there are some issues that, we have to address that are very controversial. But I think it really comes down to electing people that share the values that we have about, at the end of the day, what good governance looks like, what civility looks like, and recognizing that it is the reality that we have to work across the aisle in order to get things done for people.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And as the two of us are in elected positions now, how do we find others of whatever party and whatever perspective who might want to run? I think people look at the environment we both serve in and think, oh gosh, no, I don't want to go there. But how do we find others to see us as perhaps role models, or finding something interesting? If there's a Latina serving in this and I am a young Latina, hey, I could do that too. How do you think we go about doing that?
Well, I love this question. And for anyone watching who's kind of thinking like, maybe I'll run for office one day, do it. That's number one, is that you, like I said earlier, you are highly, qualified and smarter than many of the legislators at the Capitol and other folks in elected positions. You can do the job. I think that's one of the most important things, especially for women and people of color, that can kind of be hard to get over is, am I qualified? We get this imposter syndrome sometimes. You are qualified. The second thing I would say is mentorship is so important. I am someone that tries to find any opportunity I can to bring people into my sphere to mentor them and develop their leadership. And one example is my campaign fellow from my campaign in 2022. She was a young person. She was 21 years old, had never really been involved in politics before. She was also someone who found me on TikTok. She also is my neighbor. She came on, really learned the basics of campaigning, and now she's running for her local school board. And I'm so incredibly proud of her. And so I think really taking that upon ourselves as elected leaders to be those mentors and to guide people. And then the last thing I will say is it is a real challenge to serve in public office financially. And I would love to have our legislators, we make $24,000 a year. I would love to be able to make a living wage because I think that would be a key difference that would bring in working class people and just diversify the pool of people who run for office, right? Because right now you have to either make a lot of sacrifices or be independently wealthy or retired or maybe have a spouse who can supplement your income. And that severely limits who can run, right? So I would say that that's one of the important pieces that a lot of people don't think about is the financial challenge.
Yeah, I also think there's a lot of educational programs out there. Daniel and I are fellows from the Flynn Brown
Oh,
leadership
great.
program. And though that doesn't necessarily teach you how to run for office, it certainly opens your eyes to issues happening across the state. I know in
Yes.
Tucson, there are those interested in running for public office or certain nonpartisan academies. I believe there's a
HLI is another great one, Hispanic Leadership Institute.
right? I think there are a lot of leadership programs like that, and even partisan educational programs, whether it's Arizona's List or Emily List or Dodie London program and things from different parties that folks can also attend. There's scholarships to attend if they want to learn what it takes to run for office in their district or their community or their state. I wanted to ask Joe, do you want to lean in on this? Because I think you guys host some different programs, don't you, to help folks run for office?
Yeah, we do various things. We also have a scholars program which provides scholarships, full scholarships for young Latinos wanting to go to college, whether that be Maricopa community colleges or the three major universities. The idea is that we need more people going to college, but there's also job training that we do as well, workforce development. Not everybody needs to get a college degree. There's other ways to get the main thing is that you need to get a post-secondary education. You need to get a marketable skill. It can be a certificate, it can be a degree, it can be something that is going to help your family and you succeed. But I'm glad this conversation is talking about some things of getting involved because our democracy, it's not just voting. Voting is like the minimum. It's like it's the least we should do, and we're not even doing that enough. But by all means, you can get involved with, your parent-teacher association. You get your neighborhood association. Look at all these other programs. HLI. I've been involved in that program for a lot of years. There's the Valley Leadership. There's all kinds of groups that you can look to join, and don't be shy. But that's the whole thing, because then you get to know people, and you get to know people that are different than you, think different than you, have a different party than you, have a different political belief than you, and then you find out that you have more in common than what you thought. And it breaks down barriers. They look at you differently, and they look at the issues you're talking about differently, and vice versa. So I think it's so important for us to not demonize. And unfortunately, in politics today, that is the main tool, is to make it seem like whoever's not agreeing with you politically is the enemy, and they're demons, and they're stupid, and they're trying to destroy democracy and our country and everything for it. It's like, you know what? We're all on the same team. We're all in the same boat. We need to get to know each other more. We need to bring it down a little bit, and let's discuss things. And even though we don't agree, it's okay. Because the main thing is if we all kind of want the same thing, well, then let's figure out how to get there. Now, there are certain things that, that are going to be deal breakers. We know that we're not going to ever agree on, and that's the way that's going to be. That's fine. We know what those are. But that shouldn't bleed into all the other things where we can work together. There are so many things that we can work together on this state. Unfortunately, what's happened is I mean, even look at our legislature, you know, I mean, it's really kind of one seat, one way or the other that controls the legislature in both chambers, the House and the Senate. And it's not much different in Washington too. It's just a couple seats one way or the other. You think that would be the obvious fact that as a nation, we should be able to work towards the middle and together instead of going in opposite direction if it's only a seat or two difference, right? I mean, it's counterintuitive, but it is a way for us to get involved in beyond voting. But right now, I'm telling you what, I'm just trying to get people to register to vote, get them to vote, get to understand the process more, and so forth. Because if you're plugged into that, you have a greater chance of then wanting to get more involved on different ways of your democracy. But democracy is a participatory sport, but it's not a spectator sport. You cannot remain on the sidelines and watch that and complain about it as you watch, like it's like a football team, right? You're just in the stands watching and complaining. Why didn't they do that? They should have done this. Well, in democracy, you are the coach and you are the player and you're part of the team. You decide what happens on that field. You decide what happens in our future. You decide what happens in our kids' future, our state's future, our nation. You are the person that is the decider. And that's an important position to be in, a sacred position. But, you know, without you participating, that's just, you're censoring yourself. You're denying your own voice and you're not taking a role in your life and other people's lives.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy, Joe. And let's see, Daniel, do you want to weigh in? And before you do, want to remind the audience, please put your questions. We're going to move to Q&A from the audience right after this. But Daniel wanted to see if you wanted to weigh in on elected officials and public engagement.
I think those are all really good points. And I love the idea, Joe mentioned registering to vote is sort of the gateway, and then taking the next step to actually vote and researching and engaging in the political process and having those really good dialogues. If you don't like the candidates that are in public office, vote. If you feel like the temperature at the legislature is too toxic, run. You can make a difference. You can be engaged. You really do have to take that step to get involved. And there are so many tools and resources for people that want to be involved. You just really have to take that step to put yourself out there. And so definitely, I know that we have a few people who are participating today. I would say that everybody on this panel if you were to reach out to us, if not on this in this meeting, if you were to reach out to us and ask about the process, we would be happy to provide that information. And I think it's really important for any leader out there, if you're hearing these complaints, if you are hearing people that are dissatisfied with the process, educate them on how they can make a difference, because everybody really can. Every piece of engagement, every vote really does matter.
Yeah, I often tell people too, if you're interested in running for office, go volunteer for a campaign. Find someone that shares your particular beliefs or is in your community and volunteer, because I'm sure every candidate can use help.
Definitely.
Good. Okay, let's move on to Q&A from we have one in the chat function. This says from Lisa, can we talk a bit about Catholic religious component of our culture? Organizations are using the word Catholic in their messaging. It's shocking to see how many members of my family have changed their parties because of their faith is more important to them than almost anything else. And wanted to see if someone wanted to jump in on this item.
Wow, there's two things you're not supposed to talk about at the dinner table, right?
That's right.
Politics and religion.
We're breaking that right here.
And since we talked about one, we might as well talk about the other. I think you have to respect people for decisions that they make. And if faith is a key component of their lives, their daily lives, and that also affects how they look at the world politically, I think you have to respect that. I do. And just as you should expect them to respect your decision, maybe to go a different way. Abortion is a topic that we've talked about forever in this country. It seemed to be settled law, and then suddenly it bubbled up, and now it's a main point of discussion and debate and deliberation. So, that's where we are now. There's lots of polls on this. What we've seen, Unidos US poll came out last week and looked at Arizona voters. and it looked at the issue of abortion rights and accessibility among Latinos, including people who are religious and are Catholic. And what was interesting is that a lot of people that are Catholic still thought that it was a woman's right to choose, despite their faith. And that doesn't mean they're any less Catholic. It may mean that they just think that it should be more of a personal decision. Of course, part of that too, other people answered that, they think that it's wrong and their faith says it's wrong, and they're gonna stand behind their faith. I think that's okay. Because I think what's going to happen is, and this is what happens in democracy, is there's great disagreement and there's great deliberation and there's great debate. And then we settle it at the ballot box. We vote and we vote accordingly, and we live with the results. And that's what we're talking about here in Arizona, one of the ballot propositions. And if someone feels very strongly who they are religiously, I think it's okay, and they should vote how they feel strongly. And if someone feels differently, strongly the other way, they should vote that way too. I think it's a matter of respecting each other, having different points of view, and allowing people to vote the way they think they should vote.
Yeah. Daniel or Representative Ortiz, any thoughts on religion?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that personally impacts my family, right? I was raised in a very, very traditional Catholic household. And when I mentioned before about kind of helping my mom navigate media literacy, abortion is her #1 issue. And it's why she continues to vote Republican. And we've had many, many conversations. And I think a lot of people wouldn't expect to hear that my mom, takes this very strong stance, but it is because of her faith. And because she's someone that I love and need her in my life, we've been able to come to this shared understanding. Like I said before, right, I tried to have those respectful conversations, but with her, there was no moving her. And I've grown to accept that, and she's grown to accept me and who I am. And so I think one of the important things is that there are a lot of different resources out there for whatever perspective you might take, not just on abortion, but on a number of other issues that the church does weigh in on, right? They've taken some strong stances on climate, the new pope, and I think it's important to provide those resources to the people that you love that are in your circle. And there also is a group, if abortion is the issue, Pro-Choice Catholics is a group that puts out a lot of resources about how to kind of interpret the faith and the teachings as it pertains to this highly controversial and emotional issue. So I think it all goes back again to those one-on-one conversations about respecting people in your family, making sure hey, I hear you. I know faith is very important to you. I was wondering if you might consider reading this article or that article, right? My mom still will send me YouTube videos from very far right perspective on abortion. And I'm not gonna change my stance as someone that is very, very pro-choice. But that's her way of kind of trying to move me. And I no longer try to move her, but it's something that we have to deal with as humans, right? We're always going to come to things in a different way. But I think the most important thing is to not lose perspective that at the end of the day, we have our values for very personal reasons. And sometimes you're able to move others and sometimes you're not. And that's just the way that I've come to terms with it in my family.
Good
voter
point.
registration.
Alberto, I see your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on this because it's such a personal issue for
Yeah.
me. And I think it's increasingly a generational challenge, where our young people feel a great disconnect with their older relatives. My mom, your mom sounds like my mom, Representative Ortiz. When she was alive, I found my mom increasingly just saying things that I found incredibly unacceptable and offensive and hurtful, coming from her religious understandings on things like LGBTQ issues, reproductive rights, and so many things where I felt like they were coming from these religious sources, but were fundamentally unchristian. So I thought it was kind of ironic. But the one thing I often talk to our students that struggle with these issues, that uncle, that aunt, your parents, saying things that you find personally traumatizing to hear from people you love, is that it's easy to get triggered by that and judge them and jump down their throats and stuff like that. But it's not easy to do. But really what's important to do is to decide to withhold judgment and to not cast stones, but to respectfully engage them in conversation to try and probe where it's coming from. Because I kept learning that the moment I would engage with my mom in an angry way, it kind of closed down the opportunity to have any kind of useful, productive discussion, because you just felt attacked. When somebody calls you a name and says you're, homophobic or anti-woman or anti-immigrant or whatever, you're not open to hearing a different point of view. You just kind of entrench yourself and defend. You're not going to learn. You're not going to be wanting to know a different point of view. You're just going to defend your position. So it's not going to go well. So it's not easy, but you have to just practice saying, okay, I'm going to assume the best of this person that I disagree with and ask them questions to find out where this is coming from. Is it fear of something, fear of change? Is it anger? Is it grief? Is, what is motivating this person's position on this issue? How can I ask questions that will then open up for us to have a more meaningful conversation? Because the moment you attack, they stop being willing to hear you out. That's not easy to do, but we have to decide that it's worth trying and to practice it. And otherwise, we're just going to stop talking to each other, and that shuts down communication, and no good can come from that in our families and in our communities.
Yeah, very good point.
I would just add to that, as you look to increase voter turnout and voter registration, know that you're going to register Republicans like me. And people are going to be engaged in the process. And there are a lot of members in my family who they'll talk to me about some of my perspectives on things, and they'll change my mind. And it's gonna take that. If you feel like maybe the Democratic Party is too extreme, talk to your Democratic family members about your perspective. So maybe that influences the way they see things in a primary election and the candidates that are ultimately advanced to the ballot. If you think the Republican Party is too extreme, talk to them about that, so that maybe we end up with better candidates come general election time because of that primary process. We really just want people engaged in the process. You're not always going to agree with them. I certainly don't agree with every Republican out there or every political policies that the Republicans put out, but I am engaged, and I would like to think that my vote makes a difference and helps sway that party in the right direction. And so I would say don't judge people for registering a certain way. Have those informed, educated conversations, those civil educations, the civil conversations, so that you can really continue to make sure that you and your family are properly represented at the official level.
And it even goes beyond parties. I mean, if you look at the party breakdown in Arizona, there are more people who have no party affiliation than there are Democrats or Republicans. So, the independent voter, small I, is out there where they don't necessarily align with either party. Some people don't some people see the two-party system actually as part of the problem, creates polarization. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are taking place with election reform. Different states are dealing with it differently. You've got the open primary idea. You got, top two, top tier. I mean, there's different ways of looking at ranked choice voting. There's different ways of looking to reform voting to kind of try to get more representation than just the simple party system. So it's not always Republican, it's not always Democrat. And like I said, there are more independents than there are either one of those registered here in Arizona.
Thank you. And let's see, I am getting a note here about a question that was in our Q&A. Oh, they talked a bit about law enforcement's response. This is a little bit different direction, but threats of violence or intimidation on election day. And I know, Joe, you spoke about the opportunity to mail in your ballot to avoid that whole situation. I think certainly nobody supports violence or intimidation on an election day. None of us want to see that. Joe, I think you might have answered this in the Q&A, but are there any other thoughts on, I guess, what intelligence or what we can help with the law enforcement in terms of their reaction to this?
Yeah, I think if you see it, you have to report it. It's that simple. Law enforcement officers are hyper vigilant when it comes to protecting the election process. They will respond to threats or intimidation but if they don't get the call, they can't respond. So if you need to report it to an election worker, do that. If you need to just call 911, do that. But the main thing is that you have to report it. Just don't let it go by and then complain to your friend, or when you get home, report it. Because there is nothing more sacred than our vote. And there's all kinds of efforts to undermine the integrity of our vote and our democracy. And some of it's done through rhetoric, and some of it is done through intimidation or threats of violence. And none of that is acceptable. We have a great election system here in the United States. It is second to none when it comes to accessibility and fair and clean elections. So we need to continue to do that. So if you see it, report it. It's no different than you remember when we were hypersensitive towards terrorism after 9/11, right? I mean, we used to see those signs, everything. You see something, say something. It's the same with voter integrity. So if you see something, report it. Law enforcement officers are out there to make sure that we have that fair election process.
Okay, and anything any others wanted to add?
That's absolutely right. Having worked in elections, we would have a command center with the Attorney General's office, the county attorney's office, the sheriff's office that would be fielding those calls, and they would send law enforcement. They would send out people if they heard any instance of voter intimidation or harassment. So it's really important that if you do see something, say something, because there are people that are listening that are there to help.
Absolutely. So I think we've learned some key data or dates here also. I think, Joe, you mentioned October 7th is the final day to register to vote, correct? October 9th is the day that ballots are coming out in the mail. And of course, you can mail them in, and they already are stamped, pre-stamped envelopes right there, or you can take it to a voting center, I think it's called, this election cycle. So it can be placed directly into a box if you're concerned with that. Before we move on to kind of final thoughts from our panelists, I see Alberto has a question for the panel. Go ahead, Alberto.
So I went to an Arizona high school. I graduated from Buena High. I went to Arizona State University. I got my bachelor's at ASU and my master's at NAU, and had been working as a professional in Hispanic community advocacy for years before I ever heard of Raul Castro. So Governor Raul Castro was a Mexican immigrant, naturalized U.S. citizen, who was elected governor in Arizona in 1974. The first and so far only Hispanic ever elected governor in our state. And I was told about Governor Castro by my boss at the time, Secretary of State Betsy Bayless, who was a white Republican lady. And I was angry and shocked that at no point in my education, undergrad, K-12, no one had I'd never heard his name before, or anything about a Hispanic being governor in our state. And I think it's still, so that was 30 years ago. I think when I talk to young people today, it's still the case that most young Latinos are not aware that we ever did elect a Hispanic governor in this state, much less actually 1974, 50 years ago. So my question to the panel is, why has it been 50 years since we've elected a Hispanic in this state? And what would it take? The most recent candidate that came close was David Garcia. What would it take to get back to where we were in 1974 and have a Hispanic elected at the highest level in this state? Why has it taken so long? Kind of like we went to the moon in the 60s and then we never went back again. So what is your take on that situation for our state?
Well, I think it does go back to some of the challenges we were talking about earlier about running for office, right? It's challenging, and we need to make sure that people, young leaders, are empowered to see themselves in these positions and to have the tools that they need to run. One of the things I'm very proud of, and I'm a member of the National Association of Latino Elected Officials. And when we go to other states, Arizona always rolls deep because we actually, our legislature we have 33 Latinos from both parties, right? And that is 1/3 of the 90-member body of the state legislature. And people from other states are often very impressed by that we have so many Latinos in the legislature. And I always feel incredibly proud and humbled when taking part in our Latino caucus meetings to know that I am that representation for our community on the legislative level, but also we are really standing on the backs of giants like Raul Castro, who paved the way for, someone like me to be able to hold this seat in the first place. And so I think I would love to see a Latino become governor. I think it's going to take continued organizing, developing the leadership of young Latinos, helping them see themselves in these roles, believing in Latino candidates, and getting behind them in a really authentic way. And then lastly, what this call is all about, right? Energizing the Latino vote, making sure our community is registered to vote, informed on the issues, and that the candidates we elect ultimately deliver on the promises we make to the Latino community, because that is so important as well. We cannot take and should never take our community's votes for granted.
And I'll weigh in, Alberto, also, even though I'm not a panelist, but I'm the moderator, but we were very honored at the Tucson Hispanic Chamber to honor Governor Castro. We actually had him, I think he was 98 at the time.
Wow.
His family brought him to the chamber and we honored him with an award and were able to take photos and hear him speak, and he was still speaking at that point. It was really, really quite special for all of us. But you're right, the number of people as we elevated him in that award and talked about what he had accomplished in his life from Nogales, actually. So he wasn't in the Phoenix area where the majority of our population is, really was incredible. I think I'm a statewide elected official, and it is tough to run statewide when you're not from Phoenix area. I live in Tucson, and so making it to every corner of the state, making sure you have name recognition and people have heard of you, and so it is a big lift. But I think in the near future we will see a Latino serving as governor someday in the near future. With more than 1/3 of our legislature being Hispanic, how could it not be the next step?
I just think it's a point of pride in Arizona history to know that we had a statewide elected official, a Latino governor in Raul Castro. So I do think it's something that we need to educate and really celebrate because it really reflects well on our state. I also think, though, we need to be very clear that Latino voters, just like every other voter, they're very discerning. And so, we may have a Latino on the ballot, but if that Latino doesn't match their political ideas, then they're probably not going to vote for that candidate. And there are sometimes when you vote for a candidate who is not part of the Latino community, but can really empower the Latino community. If you think, I look at, my former boss, Doug Ducey, appointed the first statewide Latina leader in Commissioner Marquez Peterson. We had the first Latino appointed to the Arizona Supreme Court. And there were a number of Latino leaders on his cabinet. So I think it would be great to have that candidate offer themselves up for service. And if they have those ideas that really resonate with the people of Arizona, I'm hopeful that we will see that again in the future.
Yeah, I remember when I was fortunate enough to have met Governor Castro a few times, and it was truly an honor. And when he passed, there was a special ceremony for him in the old legislature in the rotunda, and Governor Ducey made that happen. And afterwards, Governor Ducey was a very great honor in him. Governor Ducey said, you know what, he was the first, but he certainly isn't going to be the last. And in fact, it's going to happen sooner than later. I mean, Governor Ducey knows that, and he was very gracious in honoring former governor. And I thanked Governor Ducey afterwards for doing that ceremony, because it was the right thing to do, and it had nothing to do with party, had nothing to do with anything. It had to do with the state. I do agree that that just because you're a Latino and you run for governor doesn't mean you're going to get all the Latino votes. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have to fight against the stereotype of the media. Quite frankly, the media identifying you as the Latino candidate instead of just as the candidate. I mean, so there are obstacles to overcome. There are some people, I'm just being 100% real here, that are would ever vote for a Latino. Racism is still alive in our society. But that doesn't mean that a Latino candidate can't run for governor. I think we have some great Latino leaders now in the legislature, Secretary of State's office. I mean, other places, running for U.S. Senate. We have candidates. I think we have a bench that we've never had before. When Raul Castro won governor, and he barely won, don't forget, it was a few tries. It took a little bit. Arizona was a very different state. It was much smaller population, and the number of Latinos were probably the percentage, was in the single digits or just barely double digits, very small. Well, now we're about a third of the population, and we're a quarter of the electorate. It's a very different environment. But I think if the right candidate came along who happened to be Latino or Latina, I think very, very possible, that person could be governor of the state of Arizona. There is nothing to keep that from happening happening now. So I think the future is bright across the nation. I know that we started off with the quote from Cesar Chavez, right? And it was the whole idea of the boycotts. I think that was a good point. That we have that power. But I mean, let's talk about the economic power that Latinos have too, right? It goes way beyond boycotting. I mean, look at the GDP, and Leah, you probably know this number better than I do, but we're talking about the trillions of dollars of the Latino GDP is greater than many, many nations. We have an economic power force, and I think now that we're starting to fill our oats and stretching our muscles and elbow room, that we're starting to fill our way towards the leadership as well. We're recognized as leaders too, and I mentioned before that Latinos are not the problem; Latinos are the solution. That's both economically and leadership and everything else. And I think as we become more known, and we marry non-Latinos, our friends are non-Latinos. People who are friends and allies with us, they vote in favor of Latino issues. They're with us. So while there is kind of this backlash now of people thinking, of basically maligning the Latino community, it can't last. It's not strong. We're going to be recognized for who we are, and we truly are an attribute to this nation. We always have been, and will continue to be so. So, yeah, I look forward to the next qualified candidate that happens to be Latino that can become a governor for our state. It could happen very, very soon, and as Governor Ducey said, it's going to happen sooner than later.
Maybe somebody on this panel.
Who knows?
You
I
got
think
my vote,
Alberto,
Alberto.
if you have any follow-up questions, if not, we'll move into final thoughts. Alberto, did you have any follow-up on that? No, okay. So let's thank you all so much for your time today. I think this has been a really interesting conversation. Of course, this is recorded, so it'll be out on the YouTube channel and so on. Wanted to see if you had any final thoughts. Joe, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll start and I'll keep it brief, guys. You're welcome. One thing that we've been telling everybody, because we say, hey, are you registered to vote? People walking by, it's like, I'm already registered. It's like, okay, have you registered somebody else? They're like, what? I said, have you registered a friend? Have you registered a family member, colleague, a neighbor, a coworker? No. It's like, well, you can do that. You can go again. You can do it online. You can do it remotely. They trust you. They can type in your driver's license number and all that. You work with you. You do it in less than 4 minutes. You'll be registered to vote. You can have someone registered to vote. And that's important, is that we tell everyone, be an ambassador to democracy. Just because you're registered and you vote, make it more than do the +1, do the +2. So I try to get somebody who's registered to vote committed to registering somebody else. I can't register everybody. No voter group can register everybody, but everybody that's registered, if they get somebody else to register to vote, and then remind them, hey, Susie or Sam or whoever it might be, remember, we got you registered to vote. Now you need to make sure you vote. Did you get your voter pamphlet in the mail? You know about that? You know about the deadlines? You got to mail it in. You got to fill it in. That's going to be the difference. It's going to be a difference that those who are registered to vote become ambassadors, ambassadors to democracy, and get other people registered to vote and to vote. So that's why I challenge everybody who sees this, if they're registered, and my guess is most people that watch this probably are because they're plugged in. Now do your second part, become an ambassador to democracy and get someone else registered to vote, and make sure they also do vote, even if they are registered already.
Excellent advice. Right on. Representative Ortiz, any final thoughts?
I think one of the important things to take away is the importance of continuing to engage with the process and to get people you know and care about also engaged in the process beyond just that initial voter registration. There are so many issues from the top of the ticket to your local school board that are impacting our everyday lives. And very often people need some, help making that connection, right? Of how does my rent is sky high? Is there a policy that could change this? And what are the candidates' stance on that policy? So you know the people around you best, and you know what issues matter to them. So try to make that connection through the lens of whatever it is they care about most and how voting will have a direct impact on that issue in their life. And one of the best ways to really make that real for people is to show them and talk to them about what's going on at the state legislature or their local city council, and making sure they have those resources available to them. So be that advocate for the people within your own network, to make sure that we aren't just, keeping the knowledge to ourselves and casting our ballot and forgetting about it, but making it a part of our everyday kitchen table conversations. You really have so much power to make that difference amongst your own friends, family, and neighbors.
Very good. Thank you so much. Daniel, any final thoughts?
Well, thank you. And it's been great to have this conversation with all of you. As I was researching for this panel, I was looking at a study from NALEO, and it showed that in 2020, the last presidential election, about 25% of the total voting population were Latino Arizonans in the state. So 25% of those who cast a vote for president were Latino voters. So we are making some major strides, some major progress. That was a 58% increase compared to 2016. And so, while there's a lot of work to do, we should just take a step back to really celebrate the fact that there are more Latinos that are engaged in the process and are making their voices heard at the ballot box, which is a beautiful thing. And I think what Representative Ortiz said is really important. We are leaders in our own networks, in our own communities, and engaging and having those conversations. Sometimes it can be really tough to talk about politics. You don't want to do it because you don't want things to get heated. But I think, it's really important for you to bring that educated perspective to those conversations and really encourage those in your network to not only register to vote, but become informed about the issues and make informed decisions at the ballot box. So a lot of work to do, but also a lot of things to celebrate in terms of representation and participation in the Latino community.
Absolutely. I think you're right on. And I think we're each influencers to whether it's our network, our friends, our coworkers, our family. People are looking to each of us, everyone who's watching this conversation also, for advice on either who to vote for, where do I get information, or how do I vote? So I think this is such an important conversation to have. I'm going to turn it back to our host right now, Alberto and Tiffany, for any final thoughts.
Well, Tiffany has been good about posting our TurboVote link in the chat. For those of you that don't know, this is our plug. TurboVote is a national online voter registration platform, and Ed Pastor Center at ASU sponsors the TurboVote platform for ASU, but it's free for anyone to use, asu.turbovote.org. It's basically a way to make it as easy as possible, take out all of the burdens and confusion that voters might have about how to update their voter registration or register to vote for the first time. And it works with all 50 states voter registration platforms. So it's just a real convenient way to help your neighbor, help your friend. As Joe mentioned, be a voter or a democracy ambassador. You don't have to be an expert. Just give them the link, and it's very user intuitive, asu.turbovote.org. And that said, let me ask Tiffany for her reflections, and then I'll close us out.
Hello, everyone. So before we head out in our DPE fashion, I'm going to take a screenshot so that we can post it around and use it in our marketing stuff. So Francis, if you could come off soon or off on camera so we can go ahead and take that photo. All right, let me get it ready, which I should have had. Okay, ready? 1, 2, cheese. Okay. All right, thank you. I just want to say thank you so much, everybody, for spending your lunch hour with us, your afternoon with us. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here today, to Leah, our moderator, Commissioner Marquez Peterson, to Representative Ortiz, to Mr. Ruiz, and you as well, Mr. Garcia. We're so grateful for your time, for your remarks, for your authentic remarks, and your genuine contribution to this conversation. I have learned so much, and I know that the replay is going to be very beneficial for folks as well. So as Alberto said, we will get this up there on YouTube very soon. We'll also have a webinar booklet that we've created that will have information about all of our panelists in there, also information about resources, in the community that you all can engage with as well. So thank you so much for all of your time. We appreciate you so much. Thank you to Francis, who's been helping me behind the scenes. And thank you so much to Alberto as well.
Mhm.
Thank
Echo
you.
all of that. You're all not just smart and dedicated public servants, but you're my friends, our friends, and we're just so grateful for you to share your perspectives and your wisdom with us. My final closing thoughts on all of this. I just keep coming back to a few themes as we have these conversations, and one is for us to be careful about how we talk about politics and elections, especially with young people. Some of what we've learned from behavioral research about young voter behavior is that the emotional tone matters. And when we are reflecting cynicism and negativity, it has an effect on young people's proclivity to be involved. That negative, angry, the conversations that we may have about politicians or about political issues, it can very directly result in people feeling that they have no voice, that there's not a point in participating. On the converse of that, the research has showed us that what does work to get young people engaged is positive and inspiring messaging. So I love that Joe talked about us all being ambassadors of democracy. We should do that, but we should do that in a way that brings a spirit of joy and celebration to the fact that we have these rights, these powerful rights, that we have an incredible ability compared to a lot of people in the rest of the world to directly influence and impact the decisions that affect us every day. So we should talk about what's possible. And for those parts of the ballot that may be especially discouraging to people in our community, let's focus on one or two issues where there's a real opportunity to do something that matters, including the ballot measures. There's so many of them, but some of them are really nuts and bolts, meat and potatoes issues that everyone can care about, like tipped wages. We all know young people that are waiters and waitresses and bar staff that would be affected by the ballot measure on tipped wages. There's the reproductive rights question that everyone has an opinion about. So we should talk about what is possible in a hopeful and celebratory way, and also remind people that the margins that are deciding all of these election outcomes have never been slimmer. We're just coming out of a primary election for CD3. Congressional District 3 was decided by, I think, 39 votes, less than 40 votes. That is nothing. So we need to really get that message out there that just a few number of voters turning up that otherwise might not have can completely change things for our state, and that our young people have what it takes, they're smart enough, and that we need them at the table. So thank you all so much for this inspiring conversation, and have a wonderful week, and let's have a great election. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.